All righty. Hey, hey. For those of you who are joining me live, which you might be, you may not be, welcome, 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 welcome. We are working on our next question of the day. So if you've been at part of Royal Palms Baptist Church, you guys know that we've been taking on something called the 30-30 Challenge. We're just trying to get people to do some time on top of, well, if they don't have a Bible time, start the Bible 30 minutes if you can. Just find time during the week just to start reading the Bible. 30 minutes a week for 30 days. It's essentially 30 and 4 weeks, 5 weeks, however many is in your month, depending on when it is. But here's the deal. We've got the books that we're going through. So this week, or today, we're doing the new City Catechism, and so we trade off each day when I'm doing this. So this is for you guys. If you have, you're a little bit older, maybe you're doing this with a family member, or you're an empty nester. This is one for you. Or you're single. I've been going through this one with some college students. In fact, today's question I did on Sunday with some of our college kids as we were together for lunch after church. So today's question comes from New City Catechism, and here's what it is. What does God require in the 6th, 7th, and 8th commandments? So my question, first off, is do we know all the commandments? I hope that as you're tracking through this, that you are seeing the commands, that you are kind of figuring out what they are. So that's important. But let's see the way that this answered. Because if you read the 10 Commandments, it's a very basic answer. It's an easy one to follow. But the Catechism is meant to kind of expand what that's all about. And so, sure, you could go and read, but this is going to help you try to understand. I'm going to help break some of this down for us in just a minute. So here is the question that we have. What does God require in the 6th, 7th, and 8th commandments? Now, here's the answer. 6, that we do not hurt or hate or be hostile to our neighbor, but be patient and peaceful in pursuing even our enemies with love. Now, you might say, hold on a minute, Pastor, let's figure this out. When I read my Bible, it says, do not murder. If you got the Old English, do not kill. Okay, so more modern translations will do this as don't murder, but now you're looking, you're saying, well, I don't even see murder in here. Okay, look, we know biblically it is murder, but the Catechism is expanding upon that and trying to tell us more. And I'll just trust me on this. I'll explain why they get there because I think it's helpful. 7th, that we abstain from sexual immorality and live purely and faithfully, whether in marriage or in single life, avoiding all impure actions, looks, words, thoughts, or evil desires, and whatever might lead to them. Okay, hold on. Now you'll be like, wait, I thought it just says do not commit adultery. And now you're going to be blowing this up and have expanded some sort of definition, which now says, if we want to see this right, it says, okay, you got to avoid sexual immorality, you got to live purely, can't, think about your actions, your looks, your words, your thoughts, your desires. I thought it just meant no adultery. Well, we're going to talk about that. It's important to talk more about. And 8th, that we do not take without permission that which belongs to someone else, nor withhold any good from someone we might benefit. And that, of course, is the 8th of do not steal. Okay, so we've got the 3, do not murder, do not commit adultery, don't steal. Let's talk about why the Catechism opens up this way. Well, okay, so there's 2 parts to this. First off, there is just the way that it's understood. So some have talked about that when you see those negative commands, there's a ultimate positive that's behind it. Now we'll get there, and that's going to be in just a moment. But really one of the first reasons we blow this up and we see it expanded is because we see Jesus doing this in the New Testament. Jesus really takes this and makes it a very big deal. Notice what he does here in Matthew 5. You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to the judgment. But I tell you, whoever is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says you fool will be subject to hellfire. Now, this is huge because notice what Jesus is doing. In Matthew 5, he's teaching on the commands, and he's saying that, look, you guys think that you're okay because you haven't murdered anybody. Check. I've not murdered somebody. I am not a murderer, so therefore I'm okay. My actions are fine. But he says, you guys don't get that there's a heart issue here. Notice what he does. He starts to go through their thoughts. He starts to say in this text, he says, whoever is angry with their brother or sister. Now, that's not just God is righteously angry. There can be a place for righteous, but this is somebody who's bitter and angry with somebody constantly. There's hate in the heart. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says you fool will be subject to hellfire. And so part of this is understanding that the hate that we see in the Bible is much deeper than the action, or the murder that we see in the Bible is much deeper than the action. And that's what Jesus is trying to hit us, that God's intention was not just make sure you stay in the little murder box, don't murder, and then you'll be okay. But he was trying to point out is that a lot of this stuff is in the heart, y'all. And so you need to make sure that you are in line with that you don't just say, I have checked the box, I haven't murdered. That I'm checking my heart in terms of my hate and my anger and all of that. Now that's important, right? Because we all just want to try to check boxes sometimes, but when you start to pry into my thought life, like Jesus does, that's a huge deal. So it's interesting when you can look at how the catechism plays out. Remember, it's saying that you're not going to hurt, hate, or be hostile to our neighbor, but be patient and peaceful, pursuing even our enemies with love. So we get that part. We get the negative part. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But notice in here, this is specifically for those people who say, well, I've done okay because I haven't hated. And no, this is go deeper. Look at your life. Do you have hate in your life? Root that out. Notice what he talks about with adultery. You have heard that it is said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, Jesus, once again, is expanding the understanding of what the Ten Commandments are all about. It's not about just don't do these things. It is much greater than that. It is really about this, that you have purity in your life. That you don't just say, well, I haven't committed this act or this act, but that I'm truly trying to be someone who is pure in what I do. Now, in that, God takes very seriously marriage. That's a huge deal in the Bible, is that the commitment that a husband and a wife make. Adultery is a no-no. There's a commitment that should be there between the husband and the wife. And so Jesus is expanding that because he's saying, you guys think you're great because you've not committed adultery, but he's saying, I want you to recognize that there's a heart issue here. So you might think you're okay, but you got a staring eye, you got a wandering eye. So you might be a married person, but you got eyes that check everybody else up and down. And so this expanded definition really hits at some of the other stuff. So, I got to tell you, over the past, few months, I feel like and I know it's been there, but it just seems to be that this is just becoming more and more of stuff that's happening. Just the countless people that have just been enslaved to pornography. And really, a passage like this that Jesus is pointing out is that it's not okay. That's something that's rooted in, and it's a heart thing. And so you can't just check the box and say, I haven't committed adultery with anybody, but I sleep around, or I haven't committed adultery, check the box, but I watch a lot of porn, or anything like that. Like, you've really got to get this right and recognize that if you don't root this stuff out of the heart, you've already done this. You've already committed adultery in your heart. If you're a hateful person, you've already committed murder in your heart. Now, I want to say this. I can do another video another time because they're not the same. Let me just equate this, okay? Just stop. There is a standard, and maybe I need to do this week. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video for you, viewer, in parentheses S, possibly two viewers, maybe I need to make a video that talks about that. The Old Testament does not equate sins, that they're not all weighted the same. So I want you to clarify that this is not saying, well, since I've already hated this person, I'm guilty of murder, I might as well just do it. Please don't. Or I've already watched, a little bit of pornography. I might as well just go all the way. Please don't. That's not what this is about. We'll talk about that. There are degrees and weights of sin, but Jesus, what he's doing is expanding the definition and saying it is much bigger than do I check the box, do the physical act. It's a heart thing. Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out in this definition is notice how there's so many positive things in this too, because our commands are negative, right? Do not do this, do not do that. But notice what it says, that we don't hurt or hate or be hostile to our neighbor, but we're patient and peaceful in pursuing even our enemies with love. That we abstain from sexual immorality and live purely and faithfully, whether in marriage or in single life, avoiding impure actions, looks, words, thoughts, or desires, and whatever might lead to them. And eighth, do we not take from permission, do not take without permission that which belongs to someone else, nor withhold any good from someone we might benefit. So you see in this, there is this swing from the negative into these positive pieces. And you might say, well, where does that come from? And this is the thing I love about this, is because we're challenged from the Bible to go beyond, did I check my little boxes, but to really try to think about, what does this mean in my life? So there is speculation, there's conversation. We see this actually interpreted even for us, that these commands are not meant to be simply don't do these, as we see Jesus saying it's much bigger than that, expanding upon that. But then you see something like Romans give us the even fuller understanding, and which is that there is a positive piece to this. So let me explain to this. If for do not murder is the command, then the positive side is, what should we be doing that is positive for our neighbor? If the command is do not commit adultery, what are the positives and all the things that we should be doing to show fidelity and commitment? If the commands do not steal, what are the positives to show that we can then be generous? And so look at this word that we see here in Romans 13, 9 through 10. The commandments, do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and any other commandment are summed up by this commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Love, therefore, is the fulfillment of all the law. So this is the last challenging piece, because typically our conversation stops with don't do these things, look at the heart and expand that definition. But we should also think of the other side of this, which is, what am I doing proactively to fulfill the law of love? So for you as somebody who, if you might have an issue with hate in your life, you need to start beginning to ask the Lord how he can use you to now be somebody who's an instrument of love towards your friends, your neighbors, even your enemies. Remember, that's what we're talking about here in this thing, is that I'm going to even pursue my enemies with love, is what it says here. If you're somebody who is in a marriage, or maybe you're single, then you need to ask the question of how do I show fidelity and purity for my marriage? How do I set up boundaries and make sure that I'm that I need to be? If you're a single person, how do I set up those boundaries now and live faithfully to the Lord and live out this life that he's called me to, of purity through it all? How do I do that? How do I save myself because the Lord has commanded me to, and to be like that for him? Until he gives me, whether he does present you in a marriage relationship with someone, or you are a life to singleness, how do you preserve yourself in purity and faithfulness for him? And then the other one, this is a kind of a tricky one too, because we're like, well, I didn't steal, but then how do I then do the opposite? How do I become generous and loving towards my neighbor in that way? So that's what I want us to challenge ourselves on. Think these things through. It's really, I thought this was a great lesson, and I think this is one that it'll be helpful to kind of continue to ponder these and work on them. But until then, we'll see you next week with another one of these ones, and look for what'll drop, I think, later this week. If you've not been watching one of my OTX NT videos with me and Dr. Andrew Marquez, you're welcome to follow along with that. We'd love to have you watch. But we'll talk to you later. And then I will make a video for us to talk about degrees of sin. I think that's an important conversation to have. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.